Good day to everyone. This is Space News Weekly for Friday, February 22nd, 2019. So they say. And I'm known as Emily Craig. Let's look at behavior of presumed government authorities at NASA and NSA as what they have done or winked at. NASA seems to act as if they're the galactic police force and promote harm to planets and moons that they visit when they bomb and intrude into ET space. We will get blowback, which ETs will return because NASA deceives us all with text that does not match images that the text accompanies. Clearly, NASA does harm in its missions, and the Navy Space Force is said to travel all over the sun system as business. What business? What are they selling? What harm? What harm are they doing in our names? You'll see what I'm talking about. We will view space weaponry used against us in part 2, and I'll show you the 9/11 attack displaying the same physical remains and evidence that was characteristic as laser fires in California. Those fires have displaced 100,000 Californians in the past 4 years. And we can hope that ETs are going to disable some of these scalar weapons in use by the deep state or the secret government or whatever cabal you want to call them. There's a war going on between NASA and ETs, and what NASA's aggressive behavior against ETs and their worlds is going to lead to is the topic of this report. Start the slides, please. NASA has been building false equipment to pawn off on us. The LEM never flew when it was in development. And I'll leave the link to that fact below with a series of links. The report by James Collier, Was It Only a Paper Moon, is authoritative in showing that the LEM was never capable of flight. Some satellites have been mocked up out of salvage materials. This we find in the photographic record. In 1986, the Challenger blew up. That was a covert operation, remote launch without a crew. But the story was there was an experimental crew who were all killed. We find out now, even today, those crew members are still alive and working in academia for decades. Now, a Navy Space Force has conducted operations around the system, and they too do harm. October 19th, 2003, NASA accidentally nuked Jupiter. October 9th, 2009, NASA bombed crater Emmaus on the south pole of the moon with 2 projectiles. September 2017, NASA bombed Saturn with a bus-sized Cassini orbiter and its nuclear payload. Never mind, all these spheres are occupied in people. So NASA crashes rockets into planets and thinks nothing of it. How can this possibly be? Okay. NASA supposedly has ships that can fly all the way to the moon, and they describe the moon as being 226,000 miles from our planet. However, if you have a backyard telescope and you point it at the moon and take a video, you can zoom that telescope all the way down to the surface of the moon. So NASA has bombed our moon in 2009 and Saturn in 2018. And if you look in this picture very carefully, you will see human figures in it. This is not an appropriate use of technology. In part 2, we look at the destruction of the World Trade Center on 9/11. I saved hundreds and hundreds of photos and images clips from that day. And what most people don't remember, because so many of you kids weren't even born then, is that the map of destruction was much greater than anybody today would even believe. This particular building was Building 6, and it was never hit by an airplane. How come there's a hole in the whole center of the building? There's no explanation for this in the mainstream media. And the smoldering mass of debris covered about a square mile. The destruction of the World Trade Center, apparently, now 18 years later, we find out that it was insulated with asbestos and had to be brought down anyway. And this is why Larry Silverstein finally admitted that they pulled Building 7. They had to get rid of the asbestos. And so the World Trade Center attack was actually an incident of insurance fraud. Okay, and there are people on who will attest to that fact. Let's take a look at Building 6. Building 6 was never hit by anything. No airplanes, and we see that there's a hole coming up, as it turns out. The hole is coming up from the third basement. Now, how did that blow up, okay? Do third basements just blow up? Of course not. And let's look at the nature and characteristics of the wreckage, that it's all turned to dust and that metal has evaporated and metal has melted onto the ground, but there's still paper flying around everywhere. How can that be? We will see in the pictures from the Santa Rosa fire and the Camp Fire that houses, and particularly trailers, have been turned to dust and incinerated, and the plastic garden furniture and the plants and the trees around them have been left intact. The real evidence of 9/11 that points to the use of scalar weapons has to do with the cars. And I'm so glad I saved hundreds of pictures of the cars around 7/10 of a mile from the World Trade Center. As in the California fires, one car is on fire, the car next to it is intact. That was a characteristic of the California, quote, forest fires as well. But you know, a lot of people commute into Manhattan, and there are all kinds of parking lots around the World Trade Center. And it was counted that 1,500 cars were crisped and turned to dust and melted into the ground within 7/10 of a mile, all the way to the freeway on-ramp, by the destruction of the World Trade Center. Now, do you honestly think that 2 airplanes could do that 7/10 of a mile from the building? I don't think so. The debris reminds me more of the movie Independence Day, with the laser weapon that destroyed New York City and Los Angeles. And the nature of the destruction, you see wheels that melt onto the road at one part of the car and the rest of the car is intact. Whole fire engines were consumed by whatever it was that hit the World Trade Center. There were 7 buildings there, not just 2 or 3. Buildings 3 and 6 were also totally obliterated. So now we can give some more thought to, okay, well, how is this done? And so in our next part, we're going to look at the use of scalar weaponry against communities. And I talk about the California community because I live here, where UN Agenda 21 wants to title California property back to the UN for the Agenda 21 program, all right? And one way they can title property back is to burn it down, all right? So this is what the scalar weaponry itself looks like and how it was photographed during the time of, these are campfire photographs of the laser strikes on Paradise, California, November of last year. And there were a lot of them. And they burned, I believe, 140,000 acres of beautiful land, and in the campfire displaced 27,000 people. That's somebody's idea of population reduction or political capital. This is what some of the drivers who were trying to escape from the fire and the firefighters had to confront. They'd never seen anything like this before. And the neighborhoods looked just like the parking lots at the World Trade Center. Notice that the trees are fairly intact, but it's as if the houses were picked out and hit with the laser beam that set each house in turn on fire. California has 100,000 displaced people as the result of these fires. And neither the California State Assembly, government, or the federal government is talking about the causes and effects and the final effects of these fires. One of the things that has happened that we who live near the area are still wondering is what happened to the people? Where'd they go? They haven't shown up in our communities, and if they have left the FEMA camps by now, they haven't come back. Where did they go? And there are investigators trying to figure that out, trying to track the people who were known to have disappeared during that fire. To date, there are still about 15,000 California homeowners who have not been accounted for. Now, they are either in FEMA camps, or they've gone to live with relatives, or they've rented another place. We don't know, and we can't tell what has happened to them. The FEMA camps are an interesting phenomenon. It seems that they are being used to collect undocumented migrants, the homeless, and displaced persons. This is the Santa Rosa fire. You see essentially the same phenomenon. The houses completely obliterated and the trees still in place. That's not a natural fire. A natural fire does not burn a perfect square like that. You know what I'm saying? So we in California, and it has also occurred in some other areas. There's been a laser strike in Greece, another one in South America that took out some power stations. We the people are not privy to what this government or whatever cabal is running this game, what they're about or what they're going to do. So now I want to set all of this aside and look at what reports we have about the other side of this war. Yes, the other side of this war. We have reports of ETs taking out our facilities and missiles. And here are 4 of them. In 1964, Bob Jacobs, PhD, former USA officer, filmed the launch, a NASA launch while in service with the 1369th Photo Squadron. An Atlas rocket was filmed and it was taken out by a UFO. In 1967, Captain Robert Salas, SAC missile launch officer, 1964 to 71, quote, "The UFO incident happened on the morning of March 16th, 1967 at Oscar Flight 1 of 5 launch control facilities assigned to the 490th Strategic Missile Squadron. I received a call from my topside security guard, and he said that he and some of the guards had been observing some strange lights flying around the site and the launch control facility. I said, 'You mean UFO?' He said, well, he didn't know what they were, but they were lights and were flying around. They were not airplanes. They were not helicopters. They weren't making any noise. A little later, our missiles started shutting down one by one. By shutting down, I mean they went to a no-go condition, meaning they could not be launched. These weapons were Minuteman I missiles and were, of course, nuclear-tipped warhead missiles. This incident was of extreme concern to SAC headquarters because they couldn't explain it. And on December 7th, 2017, NASA footage shows an alien UFO took out SpaceX Falcon 9, Elon Musk's rocket, okay? And so this particular incident happened very recently. But 2 more events come to mind because of my outside sources. And one is harking back to the 1986 explosion of the Challenger. My source says that the plan was to put some military equipment into some kind of orbit, and that is why the Challenger was taken out. But NASA never expected that anyone would know that the crew weren't on it. The other explosion that ETs take credit for is that at CERN, which has been covered over by the MSNs, so we know very little about it, and that's fishy in and of itself. The explosion at CERN, May 14th. And here's a report about that, and I thought it was a very interesting report. CERN turns on its masters. Last Tuesday, May 14th, 2014, an experiment gone awry killed 3 scientists and caused catastrophic damage to the largest super collider known as Project CERN. Dr. Ravi Mutnis, a New Delhi-based physicist, formerly attached to Project CERN, said, "The incident occurred when scientists tried to enhance the collider's magnetic coils by adding an additional 1,800 supermagnets to the existing 9,600. The combined pull of the magnets in conjunction with 9,000 filaments of magnetized cable generated a force over 100,000 times more powerful than the gravitational pull of the Earth." Dr. Manaj said the accident occurred as scientists attempted to create an interdimensional gateway or portal to a parallel universe. As protons fired across the 17-mile circular track, 600 feet beneath the ground, he said temperatures rose to unprecedented levels, which caused a cascading system failure in a detonation that instantly obliterated a 5-mile stretch of the track and incinerated the trio of scientists working on the project. My source has said ETs were to blame for this and for the 86 Challenger mishap. And so we need to give some thought to what global authorities feel free to do to the moon and to Jupiter and to Saturn. And when you see an article about the latest asteroid that they want to bomb or knock out of the sky, you've got to realize that items that are in the sky are there for a purpose and a reason, and they're not magical. They didn't just show up, okay? And since authorities feel free to attack the moon and the planets and even our own people, ETs are saying to me they will disable weapons of the cabal. And how will ETs do this? Well, you know, a great deal of the universe are telepathic, clairaudient, clairvoyant. And so they can get inside the heads, excuse me, of people doing the work or robotics doing the calculations. ETs know computer binary code. They can make fatal changes to belief and to programming. So now a comment and afterword that I got from the new sovereign, planetary sovereign. Most people don't realize this world has been settled several times. Scientific dogma insists this is the only human civilization that has ever existed. However, according to many written histories, Earth and civilizations were destroyed in war twice before, and this world was rebuilt beginning in Genesis 1:1 in the Bible. We alive now are part of the third seeding of life here. And we are looking down the throat of yet another, the sixth reset. And why? Due to commerce in slavery, corruption, pollution, and treachery. Human leaders not only do harm, they keep it secret, they lie about it, they manipulate others by the media to not care about it, and they profit off the harm that they do. Thus, humanity is still in a position of barbaric behavior, and we have a way to go until our leadership is civil. There have been a sequence of civilizations beginning with Sumer, and there was Babylon and Assyria and Greece and Rome and Tartary. But notice none of them is still here as an empire. Each was reset by disaster, flood, and fire. Intercultural evidence of a need for another extraterrestrial reset is what I'm talking about. Reset is going to affect those who do harm more than anyone else. And weaponized weather, set fires, dead atmosphere soon will be miseries of the past, especially if Mr. Trump is successful in draining our and the UK's swamp of pedophiles and fraudsters, of Illuminati elites bent on population reduction, rule, or ruin. This has been Space News Weekly, and I am known as Emily Craig. And good night to you all. Thank you.
Ai! O que é aquilo? Com cores. Tomates dos cheiros.
O que é que há lá naquela zona? O que é que há naquela zona, claro?